On behalf of the California Film Institute, welcome to For Your Consideration, a celebration of world cinema. I'm Joan Chen, and I'm happy to be here speaking with filmmaker Anthony Chen, whose film Wet Season is the official entry from Singapore for the Academy Awards Best International Feature Film category. So first of all, congratulations on making this wonderful film, so quietly captivating and poignant. What inspired you to create the story?
It's a very, very good question, actually. I think all my films are quite personal. I would say it also comes from my own sort of like circumstances of family life. You know, me and my wife, we have been sort of like struggling to build a family, to start a family, to have a kid for some time. And, you know, there was disappointment and pain. And, you know, through it, you know, I think over the years, especially in the last couple of years, I've come to really admire the inner sort of strength and resilience of women, and somehow I wanted to tell a story about a woman sort of, you know, approaching a certain age, approaching 40, and, you know, having really some form of a midlife crisis, you know, both, you know, in a marriage, in a family life, and also in a career. um I don't know why, but somehow I'm captivated by women, and I seem to be telling a lot of female stories in my work.
Yes, both your films, The Wet Season and Ilo Ilo, centered on strong, leading women characters. And and yet Yann Yan's performance was so graceful, so powerful and authentic and nuanced, and also the co-star. So can you tell us a little bit about your approach to casting and your work process with actors? How do you direct them?
Yeah, it's quite interesting, I think, with this film in terms of casting, because I never, you know, I never knew that I was gonna bring, you know, Yo Yan Yan to this film. I never knew that I was gonna consider Kojala, who played the student in this film, because I worked with them on my first film, Ilo Ilo, and they played mother and son.
Yes.
And yeah, oddly enough, so I didn't see them as, you know, teacher and student for this film. Especially, there's a very intimate sort of relationship going on between them. In fact, what I did on Ilo Ilo, I tried to repeat it on this film, because I'm actually really obsessed with casting. On Ilo Ilo, I you know, saw 8,000 over children. We went to 20 over schools, and we went through a long casting process of 10 months before I landed upon Kojala. And what was interesting is I tried to repeat that for Wet Season. We went to a lot of secondary schools. We saw hundreds of you know, 15, 16, 17, 18 year olds. And then I, you know, like selected a group of about 30 to 50 of them. They came into my workshops. We were sort of like doing workshops with them over sort of weeks and months, but I couldn't quite find, you know, a boy with that spark. Because I knew I had to start with, you know, like the younger actor, because I've always believed, you know, actors of the age, they're never trained, you know, like they don't really have the craft. So you have to find someone that really is brimming with sort of inner talent. And one day I remember I was just sort of like scrolling on my Instagram, and I chanced upon this picture, and it was, you know, like a still from a TV station of a sort of like high school teen drama. And I saw this boy, and I showed it to my producer, and I said, "Wow, this boy looks good." And he went to do some research, and he came back and he said, "This is your actor. This is the actor that you worked with on your first film." I said, "That can't be it. Like, he's so much taller. He looks so much better now. He was a bit sort of short and chubby and stubby, you know, when he was really young." And what we called, we rang him, we brought him into our workshops, and within 2 3 weeks I decided I'm gonna, you know, use him, because he really sparkled like a diamond. So when I knew I was gonna use him, I I was pretty sure I wasn't gonna cast Yo Yan Yan, because they played mother and son. I almost thought like, oh my god, it's gonna be so incestuous if I was to gonna cast them in this film. So I considered every other actress except her. You know, I look at, you know, and because she was in the film, she's a teacher from Malaysia. So I was considering Singapore and Malaysian actresses. We look at film actresses, we look at TV actresses, we, even I even met some stage theater actresses, but no one really felt right for it. And then I literally phoned Yan Yan and I said, it's so odd because you don't usually do that as a director. Like I said, I don't think you're right for the role, and it's so awkward me doing this, but maybe you should read the script and, shall we try some scenes? And that was what we did. We brought both of them in a room and we tried some scenes. She thought it was a really hard role to play as well because, as a person, like her real personality can't be more different than Ling in the film. Ling, it's sort of quite elegant and gentle. Yan Yan isn't like that. If you have seen my first film, Yan Yan is more like the mother in my first film. Like she can be quite loud and boisterous. Like innately she feels more like a man than a woman. So it was quite. I would say it was quite something to try and transform her into this because we worked really hard on the hair, on her makeup, because she has very short hair. Even to this day, her hair is really, really short. So the hair that you see in the film, it's a wig. She was wearing a wig, like the whole time. And we had to even correct how she walked and, the way she spoke. And for me, like, maybe because I was a child actor when I was, really young, I was doing a lot of children's theater at a very young age, from the age of 10 to 18. So somehow like I'm really obsessed with performance and acting, and I feel like I know something about it. And for me, like a big thing about performance is in the breaths and the pauses. And that was what I needed to correct, like in, even the way she said her lines and the way she pauses, it's all in the breaths. For me, like performance is all in the breaths. And it's about getting that right. Yeah. And I'm quite, even though the film feels very naturalistic, but I'm quite dogmatic when it comes to dialogue, when it comes to script. Like I would never allow an actor to change any single line because the way I write my script is I need to be able to perform them, even though I'm not a woman, but I could, like I need to be able to perform every line in my heart, like in order for me to write it out. So yeah, so I believe a great deal in rehearsals, and we did rehearsals for about 2 weeks. Um, yeah,
No,
it was a challenging experience, and it was a very awkward experience because given like our relationship collaborating on the last film, it was very awkward for the both of them.
but they came through brilliantly. They came through brilliantly. They gave such perfect performance. I mean, I think the best compliment you can make to an actor is like you believe they're the character, and then I just completely believe that they are the characters. And speaking of performance, I have to bring it up that I don't even remember the name of the actor who played father-in-law.
Yeah.
Extremely impressive. The first time I saw it, I thought you cast a real
Stroke patient.
yeah, incredible. That glint in that one eye is like more piercing than any two-eyed actors. The body language and just perfect. I mean, I could imagine, if it's not that well controlled, detailed, delicate, subtle performance, it would ruin the film. I mean,
Yeah, it was quite interesting to actually cast him in the film as well because his name is Yang Shiping. He's actually a very old hand on theater. He's been acting in theater since a young man. He's almost 70 now. I think he has been doing theater since for like 40, 50 years old. He belongs to the first generation of Chinese speaking theater actors in Singapore. But what's interesting is this is actually his first film role. He has never ever acted for a film before. And we did a lot of work. We went to sort of like homes where there were a lot of stroke patients, and we, together, the two of us, we were observing the mannerisms and observing all the small little nuances and the details of stroke patients. I wanted to get the realism and the truth of it. So we started to build a certain shorthand because just a little bit like a little bit more might be too much sometimes. So there's a shorthand, like like in terms of his expressions, in terms of his eyes and then his mouth, because I wrote it such that, and I checked that factually with doctors and medical staff such that like how much sort of he has to sort of like bend his mouth sideways, and then we did use a little bit of prosthetics to help pull his face down a little bit, but really I really thank my actors, I think, in this film, because I think there was a lot of trust from him, from Yann Yann, from the boy, and it was like a family, and it really took that sort of trust um, um, to make this. Yeah.
What's the shooting duration? How long was the schedule?
It wasn't very long. We shot about 38 days. Yeah. So it wasn't very long. It's actually considered very long for a Singapore film. Like my first film was shot in like 23 days.
Yeah,
Um,
crazy. But you
yeah,
had
but
time to rehearse, so that's really important.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, we touched upon your choices for strong women characters in both your films. Um, I've also noticed that there is this intimate and complex bonds you build between strangers in your films. Can you talk about this?
Yeah, I almost feel like it's a recurring theme in my work. In my first film, it was about a Filipino maid who comes into a Singaporean middle class household, and she almost become a surrogate mother, and she becomes part of the family, and definitely like a second mother, if not like the real mother of the boy. And then in my second film, if you look carefully at this relationship, like there's no sort of blood connection between the old man, between the daughter-in-law, and this boy that she teaches. But it's quite interesting that when they come together at the table, you almost feel like you're watching a family portrait. They are completely not related by blood. She's not even his real daughter, and he's not the son, he's not the grandson. But somehow I find it, I've always been very fascinated by how strangers can actually form very intimate and very complex sort of connections and bonds. In fact, I think, I've always been asking that question of, what makes a family? Is family really one which is made through the bloodline, with blood ties? Interestingly, I don't know why, but I think I gravitate towards these themes. I'm writing it now, another film that I'm hoping to shoot next year. And it's again talking about these themes, um and it's gonna star both these actors again. So Yo Ye Ye and Kojala. So
Interesting.
yeah, I thought like, I made the first film with them. I made the second film. I didn't think that I was gonna cast them, but in the end I did. I was thinking, okay, great. So now I'm gonna make this a trilogy. So it's going to be officially my growing up trilogy. I shot this boy when he was 11. I shot him when he was 17, and now I'm gonna shoot his coming of age when he's 21, and they're both gonna be leads in the film. And it's set during the pandemic.
Ah, how interesting. Really interesting. Wow, a third film with the same actors. That's the kind of family you're talking about. I mean, you I do feel such a wonderful sense of warmth, when they're together, and the goodness of people. Beautiful. And one other element that I've noticed in the film, well, all audience have noticed in the film, is the rain. The
Yeah.
film is set in the monsoon season in Singapore. And I particularly love that strong sense of place, that evocativeness of the rain. Can you tell us about why you've chosen rain as an important element of storytelling?
I knew right at the start I was gonna set this film during the monsoon. I've always wanted to include the weather in my films. But what's interesting is, in Singapore we haven't got seasons. It's a tropical country. It's very hot. It's literally the same like temperature all year round. And yes, you do get rain, but it's sort of like short afternoon showers of like 15 minutes. And there's no change. And I was just thinking, it's not like in America where you actually get snow in certain parts of America and you can get very drastic weather. But in Singapore, you don't get that. So I was just thinking, like, if I want to sort of include weather in my films, what would that be? But the only time the weather changes in Singapore is during the monsoon, when sometimes for 4 weeks to sometimes 6 to 8 weeks, you just get really heavy rains, huge downpours. Sometimes they can last for hours. It's very, very dramatic, and it only comes, at a particular time. Usually towards the end of the year, sometimes at the start of the year. And I thought, like rain can be so poetic to capture on film. And I thought it was very, very appropriate to describe uh, the emotional landscape of Ling and her journey. If you watch closely, it rains nonstop in Singapore, and the only time it doesn't rain and the sun comes out, it's actually in Malaysia. At the
Yeah.
end when she goes back hometown and not in Singapore. And I think in a way it also expresses some of my personal thoughts about my hometown. I feel like like Singapore has become very, very wealthy and affluent over the years. Um, but I almost feel like society has grown colder.
Mm.
And it's a bit of that experience that she's feeling, I think, in that film. Yeah, I really enjoyed writing the script, like describing all that rain. But to be really honest, I'm not sure if I want to write or want to shoot another film with rain, because it was so painful. Um, 80, not 80, actually 95% of the rain was all created artificially. Because we didn't shoot during the monsoon season, and you can't be, even if it was a monsoon season, like you're a filmmaker yourself, you can't be there sort of sitting waiting for the rain to happen, right? So it was really tough. It was really tough, especially on a small budget, on an independent film, to create that much rain. um yeah, perhaps never again.
It's so beautifully used. I have a feeling, when she's in the car, when they're in the car, and the rain's outside the window and everything else out at the windows all blurred, somehow you enter into their minds and hearts. You enter into an interior world of the characters. And outside, even the apartment window or the school window, that seem to pull you into their heads, into their minds and hearts.
Yeah, interestingly, there is no score in the film apart from like a piece of folk music at the end of the film, and that was actually the intention of the film, because when I knew that I was gonna write rain into the film, when I knew the film was gonna be called Red Diary Wet Season, I knew that the soundtrack of the film was the rain. So we spent a lot of time recording that rain, and also spending a lot of time sort of like in the sound mixing room, sort of, like on the sound design. Because for me, the rain, it's almost like the soundtrack.
Yeah.
It's the symphony of the film. And we spend so much time playing with the different textures of the rain.
It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful, and I think it's so brave and to have no music score in the film, not to rely on it, and just to trust your story, your characters, your visual to express feelings. Very impressed.
Thank you.
And you live in London now, and both films have such a specific sense of place. Singapore, it's delicious.
Yeah.
You captured the nuances of Singaporean culture. You think you have acquired, not only this is your old hometown, but now it's hometown. It's no longer home, that you have an outsider eye at the same time to examine the culture, class, sexism. Can you elaborate on these touchstones in your films?
I have to say, I'm almost quite glad that, I think I was born a Singaporean. I grew up in Singapore. I've been in Singapore for, like most of my adult life. I came to do film school in the UK, and then I met my wife, and then we fell in love with the city, and then we started living in London. But like, you can't take the Singaporean sort of like, yeah, out of a Singaporean. You really just can't. And I'm actually quite thankful that, because I live outside of Singapore, I almost feel like it gives me a certain distance and a certain objectivity. I'm pretty sure if I was still living in Singapore, I wouldn't have written or made a film in that same manner, like Ilo Ilo or Wet Season. Like both films, if you were to read a synopsis of the film, they could feel like really bad soap operas, right? Like TV soap operas. But I felt like with the distance, it's quite interesting. A lot of people might think like you need to be sort of like literally there. You need to be close to the picture to really understand what's going on. But in a way, I find that with distance, actually you get so much more clarity, you get so much more objectivity. And I feel like all of a sudden, yeah, I'm able to look at my own country, yeah, my own people and its society um, in ways I've never actually managed to before. Yeah, in the same way, like I'm making a third film set in Singapore next year. I've been writing most of it here. I feel like with modern life, contemporary life, where we're all connected with our devices and with Facebook and with the news and all that, you still can get a real sense of what's happening out there politically, what's like what's going on there. But in a way, you're able to sort of like detach yourself and look at it, from a more objective view. And that for me, it's important.
Yeah, it shows in your films, and I do think that you need to have distance to have this aesthetic expression. So it is an aesthetic expression, and you need distance to actually look at something and not to be right in the middle of it. Well, congratulations again. Is there anything else that you want to share with us about the wet season?
Is there anything else I want to share about the film? I don't know. All I can say, it's made with um it's made with a lot of heart. you know, like, and it's been really painful, I think, you know, like the process of making it. Why I say that? Because um I almost worry for myself, you know, because I feel like all the films that I make are always very personal in a certain way. Like even now, you know, I'm developing an English language film, you know, not about my culture, you know, it's from a novel. It has nothing to do with my culture at all, you know, but I'm so absorbed, you know, like in the characters, and you know, and it's become so personal in a way. So when it becomes personal, I realize that it really hurts, you know, like it really hurts. I remember there was a scene at the end of wet season where, you know, we were trying to do it all in one shot. There was a tracking shot, you're tracking behind Yan Yan, and it was all done in one shot. Um, and somehow we did what, 10 to 15 takes, and it still didn't feel right. You know, the movement of the camera, and when she steps in, and you know, when she turns, and when she says that line, and I remember it was so devastating for me. You know, it was the first time, I think, in my life where I actually broke down sort of shooting a film. I remember I didn't know what happened, but I remember I literally, you know, like I was so upset with myself, you know, that we couldn't get a shot, because I've always seen it. I knew that if we could, if you know, the light was right, if the movement was right, if the pacing and if the line delivery was right, it'd be very, very moving, very emotional, and I knew it, you know, like I have really, really strong instincts. And I remember I just covered my eyes and I started to cry. I just went, and I really just broke down, you know, and I could remember my AD was completely like, she didn't know what to do. She was in shock, and she said, "Are you okay, Anthony? Are you okay?" Like, and she just got like the actors and all the crew to go away, and she just gave me lots of tissues, and I just cried and cried, and I just said, "Why can't we get this shot? You know, if we get it right, it'll be so emotional, it'll be so moving." But
How did you eventually overcome
so
the
we
time?
broke for lunch. We broke for lunch. My AD was said, you know, we'll do our best. We'll get it. We'll get it. You know, like, yes, we are behind time, but let's get it. You know, like, and we did it. You know, like, you know, Yan Yan came and talked to me, and you know, like, um, and we broke for lunch and we tried again, and eventually, you know, we did another five more takes, and we got it. But what I'm saying is, like, the experience of making a film, you know, like, it's, you know, I feel like it's so ingrained into your life that it becomes so personal, the work, you know, like you feel, because I spent a long time writing my scripts, you know, like on my first film it took 2 years, you know, like on wet season it took 3 years. You know, it's also a lot of my own sort of like personal observations of my marriage, and you know, us trying to, you know, form a family, going through IVF, the disappointment, the pain, the despair, um yeah, and all of those things. So when it feels so personal, and when you understand the characters so well, you know, like, it truly hurts, and you can, yeah, it truly hurts. um um I'm actually quite worried, you know, like, if I were to continue making films this way, you know, at some point I might really go into sort of a kind of manic depression.
But isn't it also the joy of it when you can be so personally invested in something? I think it's always also the peaks and valleys.
Yeah, I think so, you know, and I'm really thankful, you know, like, you know, what you describe as, you know, my family behind the camera, you know, whether is it the actors or whether is it the team that I've been working with, you know, over the years, where um yeah, it really takes their belief and their support, you know, to want to make things happen. Um and I'm really grateful for that. And it's really fulfilling. It's really fulfilling to, you know, like, to have a group of people come together and, yeah, um create something and
Yeah.
realize a story, realize a vision. I find that incredibly fulfilling.
It's been a pleasure talking with Anthony Chen, the filmmaker of Wet Season. And thank you all for tuning in.
Thank you, Joan. Thank you.